Hi all, we're going to conclude our coverage of Ivanchuk in the Linares 1991 tournament with his quick round 12 victory against Boris Gelfand, who in 2007 is actually currently ranked 11 in the FIDE rating list. Back then he was at 2700 and Ivanchuk was 2695. So Ivanchuk kicked off with d4, and after knight f6, c4 we have g6, and after knight f3, bishop g7. So Gelfand's playing a King's Indian setup here, but he hasn't committed his d-pawn yet to d6. After g3 castles and bishop g2, he actually doesn't fancy playing d6, he plays d5 instead. Now, this was a kind of opening disaster for black, and we're going to see why very shortly. After castles, black played d takes c4, which allowed the move knight a3. Now black's capture away from the centre gives white potentially some extra central pawns and central control. And this knight a3 seems quite an elegant way of recapturing that pawn, which was temporarily sacrificed. Black decided here to play c3, which, although not letting white play knight takes c4 might be in some way desirable, b takes c3 seems to solidify white's pawn on d4 and give white pressure on the b file. So after c5 white plays e3, and he has a nice pawn triangle here in the centre, and I think white's slightly better here, although actually Rybka thinks black might be okay, dead equal. Anyway, let's see, knight c6 and then queen e2 was played. I think it's more comfortable for white. I've played black in the similar type of position last season against David Sands, and I got hammered because white has kind of things like maybe queen b5, a lot of pressure on the queen side, and this triangle of pawns is just uncomfortable to play against. Queen a5 got the queen in trouble later on, and after bishop b2, knight d5, black's moves are slightly gung-ho. White protects this c-pawn and now threatens e4, kicking the knight, and maybe d5 with a big centre. Maybe black was trying to provoke this and wanted to gain some counterplay with this next move, b6, with this idea of developing the bishop on this diagonal. But things started to go very, very badly wrong, very quickly. Knight d2 now. Rybka actually likes knight g5. I'll give you the example variation. e6, c4, and there's trouble on this diagonal. All that stemming from that b6 move, which may be regarded as a blunder. So bishop a6, d takes c, and white's now, if b takes c, threatening just to take on g7 and queen b2 check, winning that knight on d5. So this pin can't be relied on if the queen's not on e2. I'll just run that through Rybka just to check. B takes c5. Yes, big advantage for white with bishop takes g7 here, followed by queen b2 check. Now why wouldn't knight e4 work? Because the bishop takes c6. So this just wins material for white. Doesn't matter about the rook. So that shows that somehow black's gone disastrously wrong in this opening. That knight g5 was also very strong. My main line that I've checked is this one actually, where white gets the exchange there, then takes on e5, knight b5, and then a3, simplifying down maybe, or just playing queen e2 with a big advantage, at least 1.23, 1.29, depth 8. So anyway, so knight g5 might also have been a decent move, but I think maybe Ivanchuk's move is stronger, knight d2, because it harasses the queen on b3. The queen hasn't got many squares there. After e6, knight b3, queen a6, Ivanchuk now played c4, and this diagonal was a real trouble for black. So this is unleashing white's lovely bishop on g2. b6 surely didn't have this intention of trying to evacuate the queen via the b7 square. After knight db4, Ivanchuk plays knight b5. Multiple threats now. Knight c7 winning the exchange with this fork. Also just a3. Now let's have a look at a critical variation here. Queen takes a2. Rybka reckons rook c3. So there's the immediate threat of rook a1 trapping the queen. So what can black do here? Let's say queen a6. Knight c7 winning the exchange. Now d takes c. So white would offer the exchange here to increase the advantage. I think that's one of the strongest moves here. D takes c5. And in this kind of variation, black really couldn't take on c5 here, because knight takes c5 would be a huge advantage, more than 2 units according to Rybka, in fact. So why would that be? Rook b8, rook b1, and black's queen is still being harassed on the queen side. White's got this huge bishop and this fantastic knight on c5. So that shows that white's really got a big advantage now. So queen a2 was very, very dangerous because of rook c3. So let's look at the main variation, taking on c5. And in this line, white has this big bishop on the dark squares. And if, for example, this occurred, white has a big advantage. So anyway, in the game, knight b5, queen a4, knight c3 was played. So the queen has only got one square now, back to a6, and now a3. So this knight is just pre, and black's just horribly losing material. It's quite embarrassing. You're 2700 and you get busted in 18 moves with a move like a3. Something's wrong. It was towards the end of the tournament now in Linares. Maybe they were all knackered or something by this stage. There's no reasonable move for black. Let's say c takes d, e takes d. Black has to just give up a piece here. Bishop b7, a takes, knight takes. It's quite clear. White's just a piece up for nothing here. So let's have a look at in overview and summary at the game. So it was looking to be like a King's Indian Fianchetto variation, but black chose d5 instead of d6. And now this d takes c4. So this bishop on g2 starts to get to be a monster on the diagonal later, and white had this strong pawn triangle in the centre. Black, I think, went really wrong with this queen excursion, but exacerbated that with the b6 move, trapping the queen almost on the queen side. So this knight d2 was quite a simple manoeuvre, harassing the black queen. The only complication being this pawn sacrifice on a2, which had to be calculated well. So this diagonal is also very, very dangerous. So the real key move, the killer move in this game here, which maybe Gelfand had completely miscalculated, was this knight b5. So with the idea that if queen takes a2, then simply rook c3, trapping the black queen. So Gelfand's move was very desperate, just queen a4, because after knight c3, the knight was rerouted from this a3 square to the c3 square, which is a very important difference, because now the a pawn is free to go to a3, just picking up material. So Ivanchuk interrupted Kasparov's reign of the Linares sequence of tournaments in 1991. He won the tournament half a point ahead of Kasparov. I hope you've enjoyed my coverage of Ivanchuk in this tournament. And next we'll cover one of Kasparov's great victories, perhaps Linares in the subsequent year, 1992. Please leave any comments on YouTube, and thanks for listening.